are delighted to have with us Alina Gufran, author and filmmaker. Her novel, No Place to Call My Own, was longlisted for the Godrej Lit Life Award for Best Debut. And her film, Leela, has traveled internationally, premiering at major festivals including Rotterdam and San Sebastian. Joining her is Rochelle Potkar, prize-winning poet, author, and screenwriter. Her acclaimed body of work spans poetry, fiction, film, and her latest novel, The DeCosta Family, continues her deep engagement with family memory and emotional inheritance. I will now hand over to Padma. Over to you, Padma.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's lovely to see lot of people in the audience because I think we are going to have a rollicking time discussing these two books. So here we have two very fascinating and two different voices today. Rochelle Potkar and Alina Gufran. So whose latest books? You have Alina's debut book and Rochelle's, one of her latest books, is about families which don't work, about families which are not ideal. But it's not a comforting place, actually, for them. But it is something which is often very complicated. You know, the families are very complicated. So in a lot of ways, these two books ask a very unsettling question, I thought. When I was reading the books, I thought it was very unsettling in a lot of ways. So what if a place which is supposed to shelter you, nurture you, also hurts us the most? So that is what family is in this book of theirs. So let me not dither around talking about the book, but I would ask them the first question. Let's start with family and home. So home in both your books is a very conflicted place. So how did you come across this idea of a home not being a place of nurture, but being a place where you had so many conflicting emotions, a place where you were heard the most and you never found a voice? I mean, what I would do is I would ask you same question and then maybe have personal different questions, yeah. Maybe you can go on.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for that. And I'm so happy to be here to talk about No Place to Call My Own. I think in the book and in my personal life, the idea of home isn't necessarily a binary. So as much as it's a place that is meant to nurture you, I think it's because it is in our closest connections and relationships is where we are the most volatile, actually, because we have the space to be that without judgments. So I feel like that contradiction often informs the tension that at least Sophia has in the book. But I think on a macro level, it's really important for me to at least, for her to kind of contend with her identity vis-a-vis the country. Because if I could quote an author I really admire, Damon Galgut, he said, what happens in the family happens in the nation. And I think that's reflected in the book to quite a large degree because of her parents' interfaith marriage. So as India kind of slides into this, the current political climate, her family and her sense of identity is directly impacted by that.
Okay, so Rochelle, can I ask you the same question as to, what is your idea of home and how does the idea of home come across in your book?
Thank you.
Very different, yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody, and it's wonderful to be in your presence. When I was thinking about the Burgundy House, which is the book and all its characters live in the Burgundy House, which has Goan architecture, but it's not in Goa, it's in Kalyan, which is a little far away. It's a satellite town to Bombay. And you could almost think of this, the story being, a Mahabharata in a Catholic family, but with black comedy. And why black comedy is because I think, I feel everyone has one family story, if not more, inside them. One home story, love story, one at least the minimum of it. And they say that families are dysfunctional. I think families are too many things. You can never be able to pinpoint what exactly it is. And every new family member, increases the permutation and combination of what is the experience of every other family member. So when I thought about this, it was about getting my family story out of my system. I was born and brought up in a family of landlords, that's one thing, but also in a very nutty family, which laughed about everything. So, I mean, even when they told us that they were, we converted 400 years ago, they would tell it in a laughing way. Like everything was a joke. And it's not, because I mean to say, we still think about conversions and Catholicisms and Christianity and Hinduism. But for them, everything was a joke. And so for me, everything was a joke. And finally, I'm very glad to say that my family members don't read. So it's very easy to, write about them because they don't know. They don't know anything. They don't know the session is taking place. They don't know anything. They don't read. That's why, one of the things I always say, please read. So my idea was to take this family, but because there was nothing traumatic about it, just the nuttiness, the madness, really put it in the context of a lot of things like Portuguese hangovers, like, because they are dons and capos, have all the contrasting features of what is classism between a landlord and a tenant. Then when I came to Bombay is when I realized, I telescoped to see that what land mattered. Because when you come to Bombay, you live in a very square footage of space. And that's when you understand how big or small home is, right? It is measured in carpet area. Yeah. And it's getting smaller and smaller. So I went back into time to think about, was there greed in land? Is there greed in land between the seller and the buyer? Is home dreams? Is it dreams ruptured? Is every family member really happy? So many things, so this is rupture.
Okay. Yeah. So because we are talking of homes, and as a I want to talk about families. We are talking about family. Most of the times we end up romanticizing families. We talk of families being a place of nurture, where there are no constraints. We also talk of families being like support. But do you think that, is this the first place, like you said yourself, is this the first place where a family encourages tension and trauma? Is this the place where trauma first takes place? Because when I was reading your book, Alina, I realized that a lot of problems stemmed from the fact that she came from a dysfunctional family, if I can use that term. She likes her mother, but she doesn't like her mother. She's very close to her father, but she has issues with her father. And this problem with her parents carries on in her future relationships with all the people she meets. Do you think, when you were writing it, it was a very a conscious idea that the trauma and the tensions begin in the family?
Yeah, I don't think I had the idea of that right in the beginning. It was more that I wanted to pursue Sophia's journey, and it's the character that I found compelling. And as I started to unpack her psyche, I realized that, she has these tenuous relationships. But I think what was really interesting for me and illuminating was the systemic reasons why her family is the way she is. Her mother is from a bureaucratic family that comes with power and privilege. Her father is from a working class Muslim family. So there is a certain intergenerational lineage that a child cannot escape. And you're not really conscious of it as you're growing up, unless you really do the inner work. And that's the same thing with Sophia, that she enjoys the privileges from her mother's side, but eventually is forced to reckon with what it means to be Muslim because of her dad's. Because essentially we do live in a patriarchal system as well. Yeah. So that consciousness that she comes into is the journey I really wanted to tap. Thanks.
Yeah, can you continue? Are you to want to continue? No. Yeah, okay. So, Rochelle, in your book also, so when we are talking of family, here is again a family which is, it explores trauma because it is very close. Unlike her book where the family is placed differently, in your book it is, they have silences, they have inherited trauma, they have routines which have been inherited from her father's place. And the main character, protagonist, Rita, for instance, she's always thinking of a home. For her, home is her father's home and not the home she's been married into. So how do this different conditions in each book change the way the family drama takes place. Were you thinking consciously about, okay, this is how it's going to take place?
Yes. So I think, so I must mention this, that when I was first thinking about this story, because the story was in me for the longest time, and if you want to write other stories as a storyteller, you need to get this out of your system. So I wanted to really write this, but it wasn't happening in a very literary fiction kind of, way of a multi-generational story, because that's what I wanted to tell about a mother-in-law and her 3 daughter-in-laws, and how she looks differently or relates differently to each of them, and so to the children, depending upon how much the husbands earned. But this story was just not coming out in that way. And for the longest time, I was battling with this entity saying, why won't you just get out? And it wanted to get out in this very comical, whimsical, absurd way. And maybe because when you stay with it so much, it's kind of, like overripe or something. So I was like, okay, let's do the humor. Let's do the black comedy. So then everything about this book is written from that lens, where you are curating Rita DaCosta's revenge, because she comes, just for a background, she's an Anglo-Indian who's married into a Goan family. So she's a Joseph, and she's married into the DaCosta family. And for years, she's plotting a revenge. And the story is driven by her revenge. Now, what makes it absurd is because she will plan a lot of, the best laid plans with her daughter-in-law, Annette, and each one of them is going to conk off. And while it's conking off, you reach outsiders, like Inspector Guy Tonde comes into the picture, and he will unearth more skeletons in the story. And I think doing that allowed me, the black comedy allowed me, to have a gaze which is not possible when you look at through drama. Yeah. Because you can't tilt it and really have spanking fun with it.
Yeah, it's great fun reading it. But before I go further, I would just like to give you a little, if I may, brief synopsis of what the 2 books are about. Otherwise, I think the audience will kind of wonder what it is about. Can you just tell us very briefly what the book is about?
Yes, so the book is, of course, it's Rita DaCosta, who is around 67 years old, and she's the matriarch of the DaCosta family. The DaCosta family lives in Burgundy House with its many family members of sons and daughters and grandchildren and all. But Rita wants to destroy this house that she's in. And she looks at everything to take it back to her Joseph's family, because, a wall clock has come from Joseph's family. The piano has come from there. So everything, the house is full of, it's like a furniture museum, but everything has come from there. And her plan is to just destroy this family with her daughter-in-law. But then there are each, character that has their own little stories and skeletons, which no one will know until an outsider, Inspector Guy Tonde, comes into the scene, and then you come to know the whole story.
Alina, the same thing. If you can briefly tell us what Sophia's journey is all about, so we get a better understanding of what the book is.
Sure. So Sophia's journey kind of goes through the book, and we follow a decade of her life. Each chapter is set in a different city, which I think speaks to the title, No Place to Call My Own. And I think the emotional engine of the story is her coming into her sort of political and social reckoning identity against the current political backdrop in the country, while her parents' interfaith marriage is disintegrating. So obviously there's a lot happening. But I think what really kind of keeps her together is her relationship with her best friend, Medha, who's a queer artist who I think has troubles of her own. But I think more than anything, and I think this is something everyone can relate to, it is about what one experiences in that decade of being in your 20s, whether that's ambition, desire, sex, identity, and that very nebulous stage of your life. I think that's what the book speaks to.
So, Alina, when I was reading the book, I got the idea that through the story of Sophia and Medha to an extent, you were speaking for an entire generation which feels very displaced. And it's a generation which is of today's. They feel displaced, they feel defranchised. They feel that they have, exactly like you said, no place of their own, because they don't belong to any places and no place belongs to them. Sophia's journey in this book is from place to place, different. She goes to different cities, she goes abroad. She fails as a filmmaker. So do you think were you consciously trying to, and you are also a filmmaker, so I was wondering at some point, is it a little memoir or some aspects of your life which you would like to get into the book because it's your first debut book also. So did these anxieties come out while you were working through the book, or was it a very conscious decision to talk of a generation which feels out of place in the times they are living in?
Yeah, I think for me, there was obviously a huge part of me that ends up writing about what I'm currently preoccupied with. So let's say compared to my parents' generation, I've been on social media since I was 16. And that's a very real part of my life, something that I have to contend with. And that is just as a woman, but also as an artist, as a thinker. How has social media fragmented our consciousness? The way we manage to stay in touch with friends. We make plans on DMs, and we have the hookup culture. These are things which have changed the consciousness of our generation, which I thought was really important to explore, but that's just something that I realized in retrospect. I think when I first started rendering the character, my intention was to do it complete justice. I wanted to tap into the innermost sort of preoccupations that Sophia had.
Yeah, so because when I was reading Sophia, I understood her to be a person who has absolutely no sense of rootedness in her life. She goes through relationships, like every day there is a new guy in her life. So is it a part of what people, girls of your generation are living through? Is this the way they search for their identity? Because at the end of the book, it is Sophia wanting to know, who am I? Is this what I am? I mean, am I the sum total of all the guys I have slept with or have met with? So is it that? Is it that anxiety? And also her severe trauma of not being in place, of not having a home to her.
Yeah, this is something that I think we can really get in depth with, because I think what she tries to battle against and contend with is what a lot of her peers enjoy, which is caste and class privileges, right? And even though her father has worked to put her in the circles where she can code switch, she can appear a certain way, she can sound a certain way, she knows she doesn't belong there because her roots are working class, essentially. So in that code switching, it is inevitable that you lose your way. And I do feel that characters, as well as us, we are a sum of what we come up against in life, right? Like the spaces where we have friction. And it's often that we ask ourselves that, are all my troubles or the friction that I have in my life what makes a character? I think that's a pretty famous saying as well, right? That the strife you go through is what makes you. So I don't think the book provides any conclusive answers. And I don't think there are any conclusive answers, because identity is something that is not static. It remains in flux. So yeah, I do think, but it's been very interesting because I feel like a lot of the outside lens on the novel has been, she's not a very likable character, and I enjoy that, because having to assert some kind of moral authority on a character, I feel like is not a fiction writer's job. But I think a lot of the outside lens has been a bit irritated by her decisions, where it's like, why aren't you making the right decisions?
You feel like shaking her up and say, please make up your mind.
But how often have we looked at ourselves in the mirror and asked the same question? And I think for me, that was the intention. I wanted to create that sense of frustration with the character.
Rochelle, coming to your book, I know her book is so different from Alina's book because this is highly comical. They have this very wicked, deliciously wicked, I would say, women characters who take things in their hands. They're totally badass, actually. I think that's the best part of her book. But again, underlying all that, there's also a war between caste and class. For example, in the book, you have Blanca, who is supposed to have come from a very low caste convert she is, whereas Annette is a Brahmin who is converted to Christianity. So were you very consciously brought it into kind of, were you trying to make a point about caste and class and conversions, and how do people look at it?
So, no matter how much I try to stay away from any serious topic when writing this book, because I wanted it to be fun. And, this was written during the times of, like it was being finalized during the times of the live streaming of Gaza. And before even thinking about the environment or the book, the story world, I was questioning myself as an author of, could I permit myself to laugh? Because is these the times to laugh? Are these the times to laugh? And I was like, when is the time to laugh, actually? Because we are always in strife. Yeah. And so I didn't want any serious topic to, kind of be part of this book. But even the Christians or the Catholics cannot get rid of their caste understanding and hierarchies, because I don't think anyone can forget their caste. They cannot forget it. Of course, we become aware of not subscribing to it, of dismantling it, but we somewhere know, because it comes down through the generations. You are told about it. So you're told whether you're Brahmin, you're Kshatriya, you're this, you're that, you're told about it, yes. So that was part of that, and that's why it is not addressed a lot. It's only addressed as one dialogue, wherein the mother-in-law is making a differentiation between the daughter-in-laws of different caste. And she is talking about who should inherit the power, why you should, and how the fact that Anglo-Indians don't have a caste if they are not intermarried.
Yeah.
So caste did feature, but then I think a lot of intersectionality in any case features. The war between the sexes feature. The patriarchy and the misogyny is simply a trickle-down effect into what is cooked in the kitchen. That's decided by Don Theodore. And then by Don Pedro, because they are going to decide whether you're going to make Anglo-Indian food or Goan food. So there's so much of, if there's kitchen politics, there's also the gender, deciding.
Yes.
Who pays the bills for the groceries. So everything like that, little things like Rita DaCosta, like debating with her son for some pocket money.
Yes.
I mean, that in itself tells you a lot. And I didn't want to make this serious because I think my poetry has been quite serious, feminist. This was the time I wanted to laugh, actually, because I have not been laughing for a long time. So
a good way to
I
laugh,
wanted to do that, yet caste, class, privilege, the war of the sexes, patriarchy, misogyny, I couldn't get away from it.
So you kind of bring in it very subtly, and
Yes,
then
it's there everywhere, and even the stories of marriages. I think I really like to, through this story, look at the different marriages that are there in this. Like there's this marriage between Don Pedro and Annette, which is almost loveless, but he's fine with it because she's like a trophy wife. And she has her own kicks somewhere else. And that is a deeper love story. But she is more manipulative even in that deeper love story. And of course, and then you have another marriage which is a non-marriage, because it's between Fabian Furtado, who eventually becomes a priest, and Apollina, who I think she never understood what marriage is or being female. So different, these things didn't leave me. I would have loved to not write any of this and just laugh out, but they did seep in, because that's what human beings in this society is about.
So, and because we are talking of women, in both the books, women carry the emotional weight of the family, whether it is in your book or in your book. So, and very quietly, they do not make big, a shout out about it. They do not talk too much about it, but they do carry it. So, do you see this kind of emotional endurance which women have as a sort of trauma which is perpetuated in families or in homes? Again, it is vis-a-vis patriarchy system. So, but women are enduring. So, but is it a kind of, because we are talking of trauma here, so is it a part, do you see this emotional endurance also as a form of trauma, which women undergo?
I think generationally that has been the case. The good thing with Sophia is she is not quiet. If she's upset, she'll make it everyone's problem, which was often the case in my family, at least that I observed, with maybe certain older men. Like things revolved around their moods, and that's a kind of narcissism. Of course, I don't want to pathologize. I do feel this generation gets tasked with a lot of therapy speak as well. But at least with my character, that's something I definitely wanted to explore, where as much as there's so much going on with her in her interiority, she's also very okay to make it other people's problem. And for me, that's like a micro act of feminism, Somewhere, it's not perfect, but somewhere you start undoing that quiet endurance that I suppose we've seen our grandmothers and mothers go through.
So how would you put your character, like the main characters, as in there's Rita, there's Annette, and there's Blanca, and there's very surprisingly Maggie. So, they are very four different characters.
And in a way, of course, very subconsciously, what I realized is that they somehow, they kind of four-quadrant what feminism is in Burgundy House. But it was not, very conscious. While I finished the book, I realized, isn't this trajectorizing it this way. But when we start with Rita, of course, she's 67, so she's of a different generation. Her entire arc or her whole story is to find out patriarchy, because she's going to awaken to that at the end. So she is fine and very habituated, very internalized with patriarchy being the law of the day. I don't think she even realizes she's swimming in that ocean, because that's why she's so subscribed to her father and her brother and her lover in the Josephs. And even when she comes to the DeCostas, it takes her the longest while to wake up to that, because she's playing the same game that the men are playing. It's only when the men go against her does she understand. But that, I think, is also, to, in a different way, to do with the awakening of sisterhood in society. What I find is that a brotherhood might be something which is very ancient, but sisterhood you awaken to after you have had enough of misogyny and patriarchy. You don't awaken to that very soon. It has to have a dose of, then you realize, oh, everyone's going through that. And then there's a unity that forms.
Yeah,
it
so
takes its time. So Rita had a very late awakening, but Annette, I think, is already jumping the system. She's playing and gaming the system because she's the younger daughter-in-law. And Blanca is a victim. She is a typical victim that you see in many, many places. Like, that woman who you're waiting that she should take something up. You're waiting for her to wake up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can only pray because she is the victim there. And I think she doesn't have an awakening of sorts. She just has a realization that something is going completely awfully wrong in this place with her daughter. Maggie is the voice of reason, and one of the things I wanted to, naturally the story got to is, what do you do with the voice of reason? Because if the voice of reason is very awake, then the story cannot go forward. Because if the story is corrupt, and the voice of reason is awake, the voice of reason will say, hey, he will call you out. So in order to not be called out, she needs to be comatose. So the voice of reason awakens only at the end.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So a very interesting point, we're talking about sisterhood. And though Annette, steals from Blanca initially, in the end, she kind of makes up for it by leaving her something, which could be I would like to believe that they kind of form a bond, which can see them through, because both the books have no resolutions at the end. You can just kind of...
It's a kind of a gold biscuit atonement.
Okay. So yeah, it's atonement, but maybe not a form of a sisterhood. Okay.
Or maybe latent, because I do see a lot of latent sisterhoods that happen.
Okay. Would you like to read a little passage from both your books so that, maybe... before you could read, I just wanted to make a point here. The character of Sub-Inspector Gaitonde. When I was reading it, I thought I was looking at the various police characters in films which I have seen, because he's typically like what you see on the screen. So was it any inspiration? Did you draw any inspiration from any films, or was it just a figment?
No, see, I wanted to make him really, slapstick and very unserious, because the book had a lot of serious stuff going on.
Yeah.
And the only way to peg him is that he hates families. Yeah. So you have a family hater who's a brahmachari, who never liked family, who's seen his families fail, and now he's put on a case of family drama. So that was, I definitely wanted to have him in that space.
But in the end, he gives in. He gives in to the lure of a family.
Just see how it goes. That's another conversion, right? Yes. The conversion of love without the jihad.
Yeah. Yes. So maybe you could just, it will be nice for the audience to listen to some excerpt from... Maybe you can talk about the Gaitonde or any portion. Or you can, Alina, if you can.
Chapter 5, Bombay. I sit across the other fellows as the grant head Suchitra, a woman in her late 50s with a mop of curly grey hair, her sunburned neck swathed in a wrinkled cotton sari, beams at us. I scan the room and everyone looks visibly nervous. We're an obviously eclectic crew, even if our otherness is what ties us together. I'm pulled to make a comment or pass a joke to slice through the tension, but I refrain. Something tells me it may not go down well. This isn't the crowd that Medha and I have run into in the past, while gate-crashing parties and rooftop bars on the embassies of Nehruvian Delhi. Mirza Rahman, spoken word poet and classically trained singer, Muslim, trans woman. I'm writing a one-woman play narrated through songs exploring gender, the marginalized voice, and my journey of coming to terms with being at home in my body. Simultaneous snapping of fingers and nods of appreciation. Maham Islam, I'm a writer and dancer from Shillong with an interpretive dance project that I perform in my bedroom as I navigate spaces, my body, and memories through movement. Abid Khan, filmmaker. My film is about two women from rural Bengal whose dreams intersect as they fight against patriarchal forces in their small village. Naz Farooqi from Delhi. I'm creating a miniature collection of Muslim women from history and depicting them more as subjects with agency and authority and less as objects of desire. It's my turn. I talk about the premise of my script, but I jumble all the words, and my voice feels like it doesn't belong to me. A Muslim girl and a Hindu boy fall in love against the backdrop of increasing hate crimes in India. That was it. That was all I had. Without an arsenal of important words and essential degrees, I'm unsure of how to define my work. We are living in an unprecedented time. We all hoped it wouldn't come to this, but it has. And it's brought us to an unpleasant but unavoidable crossroads where we have the chance to make history. Belonging to the minority in the line of fire has its uses. It is our privilege and duty to tell the stories that are being erased, to embody the voices that are being silenced. The fight is long and difficult, but you have me, and more importantly, you have each other. Until then, we hope to support your work like we would support our own. And inshallah, we'll have some brilliant young voices as the symbols of protest as this fellowship concludes. Salams. Suchitra finishes with a flourish, a practiced smile etched across her face, and everybody snaps their fingers like we are the world's worst poetry slam. I'm not sure if her speech is meant to be motivating. It's tiring to be defined by my last name, and my privilege has made sure that I've been cushioned against most of what Muslims are going through. I can't rent a house in some parts of Delhi or Bombay, and often I feel panic crawl up my chest every time a cop stops me at a naka, or when I stand before an immigration officer scrutinizing my passport. The guy I was briefly seeing in Prague became distant with time when he realized I'm Muslim, despite my earnest insistence that I wasn't practicing. Experiences that didn't amount to much except a painful consciousness of my last name. Even though I grew up in Dubai, where being Muslim was the norm, and had a Maulvi come home to teach me the Quran in Arabic, I mostly suffered through it, partly due to teenage rebellion and partly because of a vague suspicion of being asked to blindly believe in something. Islamic studies, moral studies disguised as religious teachings were mandatory in school until the 9th grade. The price of dishonesty is self-destruction, love your friends, help a man in need, respect your elders, there's no God except Allah. As I looked at Suchitra, I was reminded of these lessons. Is it bigoted to cherry-pick 5 Muslims from different parts of the country and put them in the same room to talk about their struggles as a minority? Is it cultural appropriation when a woman named Suchitra Iyer uses Inshallah and Salam? Perhaps it's not appropriation. Perhaps I'm being harsh. But it certainly is off-putting since it reminds me of the one day a week my dad decides to be a good Muslim.
That's a very, very powerful passage which you read. Yeah, what would you like to read?
I just fished out one scene because I can't find, I wish there was a Control F button on a book, but there isn't.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Annette sat on the shed's bench box and unbuttoned her dress. Her yellow bra was too sunny for the damp shed. She spread her floral stole over the sackcloth covering the box. Around her were other sacks with iron objects, tools, horseshoes, and hammers. Dominic too had begun his act of leaving, and the tool shed looked bare with clumps and heaps of clutter. Gavin entered the shed from its other door and stood studying Annette, smoking a cigarette. She saw him and rushed into his arms, and his tense body thawed. "What do you want from me? I thought you were done with me. How does it feel to be the leader of this place, huh? I'm only happy for you, Gavu." She kissed the grimace on his lips, and he was out of breath with all the memories of their lovemaking coming flooding back to him. She was more dangerous than a hero's dushum, more lethal than a misfiring gun, more real than the wrath the public had for errant politicians. "I didn't know I could be a leader," he said. "I love you. Why would I lie? I am the child, your child." She lay over the bench box. He ventured to touch her tummy. "I wish it's a girl. I want a girl." "Me too." Pedro is growing weaker by the day. That leg of his is rotting. He can't sit up. And it stroked her breast. Gavin stooped low and lay beside her, tenderly holding her into his embrace and kissing her chest. You know, I'm yours. My heart is a slave at your service. You don't even know what all I have done for us, love. I shushed Maggie when she came to know about us. Who does that? Takes so much of trouble for love. But what would she do about us? Tell her mother, who would confess in church to Father Fabian, who would tell the whole town because he loves everyone, and then all would know. She put a finger to his lips and traced a fingertip over his pout. Let's rule this neighborhood together. I mean, turn by turn. One day you, one day me. My queen. Your wish is my religion, but I would like to give the baby my name when we get engaged. I have to divorce Pedro first, Gavu. Did Vaswani give you the redevelopment agreement papers by any chance? Gavin didn't understand this sudden change of topic to business and worldly affairs, but he could never understand how his lady love's mind flitted like a butterfly as her fingers played with his chest hair, or how her lips trembled as she mumbled her next plan, her toes playing with his. No, but he will soon. He bent low and kissed her, sucking her lips like a bee consuming nectar slowly for honey making. Give the files to me then, okay? So no one's cheated over their well water or papaya trees. She gasped, extricating herself from the gush of their smooch and rush of warm breaths. He laughed over the pungency of those bygone tenant woes that now, in his new leader avatar, seemed small as she kissed him, unbuttoning his white shirt and drawing him into her embrace, urging him on top of her. Also, I heard there's gold under the estate grounds, stashed away by our great Carmino Papa. Can you believe it? What if it's true? He said, before immersing his nose into her aromatic armpits. He licked the familiar caramel-flavored sweat off her skin. He gently cupped her jiggly breasts and mouthed promises over her light brown nipples with his greedy, hungry tongue. He went down lower over her and with his pink tongue rimmed her flabby tummy's navel. Maina, who's is the maid of the house, Maina is watching them actually. She's followed them and she's watching through a trellis. Maina's legs shivered outside the tool shed from the cold drizzle that drenched her and from the fear of being caught by the other tenants or their children, but most from the sheerness of two beautiful beings making love. She had seen sex before. In her village, it was a common unwanted sight that brought her neither alarm nor delight. Because of the small rooms of small houses of many family members, sometimes keen couples used cornfields or night terraces or dark corners, but their acts were hasty, mandatory, and ritualistic. What she saw here was a tenderness of art, a worshipping of naked bodies, as pious as genuflecting in a temple. She saw music and poetry, nature entwining like the ebb and flow of a seashore under the pink rouge of sunrise. That's when she realized that lovemaking was a language between two people, so different that each couple spoke their own dialect, and it could never be replicated or translated. Her head was abuzz with thousands of such languages there might be in the world. She stepped away, trembling, and trundled back on her path, fleeing home.
That's lovely. Actually, these two passages really kind of tell you how different the narrative style of each author here is. Rochelle's is over the top, dramatic, very noisy, whereas Alina's is, it speaks, it's more interior, it's very intimate. In fact, even she has a number of love-making scenes in the book, but they're very matter-of-fact. It is as matter-of-fact as Sophia is. Sophia doesn't attach any importance to any of these romps in the bed. Whereas this sex, because for her it is just a means for a physical to fulfill her physical needs. Whereas in your book, this whole act becomes the way it's been described. It becomes very you can almost feel it in that way. So that's one big difference I found in both your writing styles. Yours is more interior, inward-looking, more intimate, and more subtle. Whereas hers is, it's like very much like the family the characters belong to. So, so coming to this whole question of, when we are talking of the places. So this whole question of is displacement, because both of you talk of displacement, both the books talk of displacement. Is it more painful when you have never belonged to a place, or when you have belonged too tightly? For example, in the Costa family, everybody is very tightly entwined, everybody is in each other's business, whereas in No Place to Call My Own, there is displacement in every chapter. Sophia is moving from place to place, from geography to geography, which kind of, which informs her life later on. So you think it's, in that way, it's more painful? In displacement, does it become painful?
Yeah, I think for me, both ways of being come with baggage, I believe. I think in this particular story, the idea of immigrant baggage and when people are systemically kind of ghettoized or, systems work against them, they might escape that and build a life for themselves. And that might then lead to a lot of opportunities for Sophia, for example, in this story. But that cultural baggage of displacement is subtle, but it's very insidious. And I think it plays out. You become the product of a nuclear family. You don't have the whole village, so to speak, of any sort supporting you. And I don't think this is just about shifting countries. I also think it's the difference between being in a community in a smaller place in India and being a nuclear family in kind of a nebulous place like Gurgaon, for example, right? So when you are not supported and your only points of reference as a young person are your parents, then your world naturally narrows down. And I think that's why for Sophia in specific, being an artist is kind of a rebellion, because it's her way of asserting agency. It's her way of kind of imprinting and trying to understand her DNA and then kind of imprinting that upon the world.
Yes, I do get your point. Yeah, you go ahead, but if you can tell me about displacement in
Yes,
your,
yes.
there is a huge displacement right in the beginning in your first chapter. Go ahead. No, I think she has finished, so maybe you could. Yeah.
No, so I think for me the displacement is in not going anywhere, because the Burgundy house itself is the pivot of greed, and all the characters there are defined by the resources there. Whether it's the ownership for land, whether it's the gold that's there or not underneath, whether there's going to be the redevelopment plan, whether they can loot the tenants, whether, everything from gold to jewelry, land to, their definition is in that house. So the displacement is more in terms of what ambition they have and where they're going in different directions, but they're not moving away from this epicenter.
So that's the family and that's the home.
Yes.
I know. Okay, we are running out of time. I just wanted to make one point about in the end there's a CA movement happening, of course, which is also a very big part of Sophia's life. Do you think it would have made any difference if you had not used it? Is one thing, because this book is not about protest, or this book is not about what happened to the Muslims, but it just increases the trauma. It brings in the political trauma. Is what I felt, the background of CA movement and
yeah, I
protest.
think for Sophia, that was actually an important turning point, as it was an important turning point for me in this country, because that is the first time she was truly forced to contend with her identity. She's not a practicing Muslim, but because of her last name, the world looks at her that way. So that is a very real thing that you kind of wake up and contend with, because being Muslim is not like a 24/7 job. You don't perform it. But to me, I don't necessarily look that as trauma. I look that as reality of what is happening, right? So.
We will just open for questions here. We have some time, so yes, any questions from the audience? Yes.
Hello, I am very happy to be here, and I am a student throughout my life. I would like to learn from her. I have got a few questions because I am also a student of literature and also history. Here, after the partition of the country, isn't it? Pakistan became theocratic. So also Bangladesh has become theocratic. Whereas in India, we are secular and all that. And here some people say that the minorities don't have any security here. But I don't know why Rohingya Muslims come into our country and settle here. Why Bangladeshi Muslims come and settle in our country. Whereas no Hindu from India goes and settles down in Pakistan or in Bangladesh. Please.
I feel like as a fiction writer, I'm in no position to answer that question. If you're asking me that question as a fellow Muslim, a citizen of the country. Again, I would have to be an expert in geopolitics to be able to answer your question.
Fantastic.
Any other questions which...
Any other questions
Any
related
other
to
question?
family and traumas?
Or you could also, both of them, as you know, have been screenwriters. And in fact, one of the points which I forgot to mention was your book reads as a script. And yours, because you have also been working on your script. So I think it's so descriptive that I could easily imagine it as a screen. And I'm sure somebody would kind of just grab the book and just say, okay, let's
I
make
think
it into...
nowadays my stories come in dual citizenships.
Okay.
Of the novel and the screenplay.
And yeah, that's a good way to go. Any questions, or should we still have a few minutes to go? Yes, sir.
We have time for one question.
Yeah, so this question is for you, Rochelle. You mentioned about in your family, everything was just laughed it off, and all of that. So when there was some trauma-like situation, how was it handled? Did you develop some resilience yourself while being part of a family?
I think they mostly escaped, or they kind of looked through it, which is another kind of absurdity. So I don't think anyone took it face front. It is always an absurd escapism, which is another kind of trauma, right? Because it's not resolved. Yeah.
Do we have time for... Are we done?
I'm the only one who gossiped about the family and kept my acts together.
Thank you all. Thank you both.
Thank you so much
It was wonderful
for this
talking to
wonderful
you. And
conversation.
please go read the books because they are both fantastic books. Thank you.
Both the books are available. And will the authors be signing them? Will the authors be available for signing the books? Yes. The authors will be available for signing the book. So please go and then pick up the book. Thank you so much for joining us today. Family stories are, after all, are often the first stories we learn to survive. Thank you so much, Rochelle, Alina, and Padma. Thank you.